Gunnery Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez stood on his apartment rooftop, sipping his morning coffee as the San Diego sunrise painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The peaceful moment shattered when the first crystalline ship broke through the cloud cover, its surface refracting sunlight like a massive diamond descending from heaven. He didn't rush, didn't panic. Instead, he took another slow sip of his coffee, mentally calculating trajectories and potential landing zones. The ship's design was unlike anything in Earth's arsenal, all smooth curves and transparent surfaces that seemed to bend light itself. Behind it, more vessels emerged, each one larger than a carrier group. His phone buzzed. The base would be calling soon, but this was Lieutenant Colonel Santos. "You seeing this, Gunny?" "Yes, ma'am. Looks like we got some unscheduled air traffic." Rodriguez watched as smaller craft began separating from the larger vessels. "They're setting up for a standard containment formation, multiple insertion points." Assessment. "Their tech is advanced, but their tactics are textbook. They're not trying to hide their approach. Either they're very confident or very naive." He paused, noting how the smaller ships were positioning themselves above major population centers. No electromagnetic interference yet. No communications blackout. They're being careful. "Keep watching. Base command is spinning up, but we need eyes on their first move." The first sign of the aliens' intent came in the form of shimmering curtains of energy that began cascading from their ships, forming transparent domes over sections of the city. The barrier nearest to Rodriguez's position was about 3 blocks away, its surface rippling like heat waves off hot asphalt. His phone chirped again, this time with civilian alerts. The public emergency system was advising people to stay calm and indoors. Smart move. No need to create panic when they didn't yet know the visitor's intentions. The first alien craft to land chose the Petco Park parking lot. Rodriguez had to admire their choice. Open space, minimal obstruction, close to population centers, but not too close. The ship was smaller than the others, probably a diplomatic vessel based on its ornate design. Its surface shifted colors as it touched down, going from reflective crystal to a soft, pearl-like opacity. "Gunny, you still there?" Santos' voice carried a note of tension. "Affirmative. First contact is about to happen at Petco Park. Their containment field doesn't look like anything kinetic." He pulled out a small laser rangefinder from his pocket. Energy readings are all over the place, but nothing matching known weapons signatures. The ship's hull seemed to melt, forming an elegant ramp that touched the ground with barely a sound. The beings that emerged looked almost human at first glance. Humanoid, at least. They wore what appeared to be ceremonial robes that shifted colors like their ships and carried no visible weapons. Rodriguez's trained eye caught other details. Their movements were too smooth, almost floating. Their limbs were slightly too long, and their faces had an otherworldly symmetry that crossed into uncanny valley territory. "They're broadcasting something," he reported, hearing a faint humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Sounds like they're trying to interface with our communication systems." The humming crystallized into words that echoed across the city. "People of Earth, be at peace. The Varaxian Empire welcomes you into its embrace. Your struggles are now over." Rodriguez couldn't help but chuckle. The alien's tone was so genuinely earnest, so completely convinced of their own benevolence, that it almost hurt to hear it. They truly believed they were doing Earth a favor. "Man," he said into the phone, "I think we've got ourselves a situation. These folks have definitely never watched a human historical documentary." In the distance, he could see more ships landing, more energy barriers rising. The Varaxians moved with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat, never faced real resistance. They deployed their advanced technology, like artists installing delicate sculptures, completely unaware that they were setting up in the backyard of a species that had turned warfare into a science. "Keep monitoring," Santos ordered. "Let's see how long it takes them to realize their mistake." Rodriguez settled in, pouring himself another cup of coffee from his thermos. This was going to be interesting. The Viraxian containment field rippled like water as Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez walked straight through it, coffee still in hand. He could feel a slight tingling sensation, similar to static electricity, but nothing more. Behind him, he heard gasps from the gathered civilians who had been keeping their distance from the barrier. 3 Viraxian security officers, at least he assumed that's what they were based on their more elaborate robes, stared at him with their eerily perfect faces. Their expressions shifted from serene confidence to something approaching confusion. "Interesting light show," Rodriguez said, taking another sip of his coffee. "But you're currently parked in a restricted zone. There's a city ordinance about unauthorized vehicles in this area." He kept his tone casual, professional, like he was dealing with a tourist who'd misread a parking sign. The tallest Viraxian stepped forward, graceful movements now showing signs of uncertainty. "This is impossible. Our containment field generates a precise resonance that disrupts voluntary motor functions in all known species." Rodriguez shrugged. "Guess you haven't met many humans yet. I'm Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps. And you are?" "I am First Observer Kalzani," the Viraxian replied, their voice carrying that same musical quality as their earlier broadcast. "Your designation suggests a military function, yet our scans showed no significant defense infrastructure on your world." A small crowd was gathering at the edge of the containment field, phones out, recording everything. Rodriguez noticed several other Marines in civilian clothes positioning themselves strategically around the perimeter. Good. Everyone was following protocol for unexpected first contact scenarios. "About those scans," Rodriguez said, pulling out his phone. "Mind if I ask what technology you're using? Might help us figure out where the misunderstanding happened." Kalksani produced a crystalline device that projected a holographic display. "Our quantum resonance scanners are the most advanced in known space. They detect all forms of energy signatures and artificial constructs." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "There's your problem. You're looking for the wrong things." He gestured to the nearby buildings. Human military technology isn't always about energy signatures. Sometimes it's about concrete bunkers, underground facilities, and good old-fashioned steel. The other 2 Viraxians were now consulting their own devices, their movements becoming increasingly agitated. "This is concerning," one of them said. "We're detecting numerous void spaces in our scanned data, structural anomalies that our systems interpreted as natural formations." "Those would be our bases," Rodriguez confirmed, "the ones you parked your ships next to." Kalksani's perfect features showed the first signs of genuine worry. "But your species has barely achieved lunar travel. You have no energy shields, no quantum communications, no faster-than-light capability." "Don't need them for defending our home," Rodriguez replied. He noticed Lieutenant Colonel Santos approaching from the direction of the vase, flanked by 2 MPs in full gear. "Ah, here comes someone who can explain things better than I can." The Viraxian's attention shifted to Santos, their expressions registering new confusion at her calm, professional approach. Like Rodriguez, she walked through the containment field without hesitation. "Lieutenant Colonel Santos, base commander," she introduced herself. "I see you've met Gunny Rodriguez. I hope he's been helpful in explaining your parking violation." Kalksani looked between them, then at their useless containment field. "Your species. You're not what we expected." "We get that a lot," Santos replied with a diplomatic smile. "Now, should we discuss moving your ships to a more appropriate location? We have protocols for visiting aircraft, or spacecraft in this case." The 3rd Viraxian, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "Our preliminary anthropological reports suggested your species was still primarily focused on ritual combat sports and ceremonial military displays." Rodriguez couldn't help but laugh. "Those weren't ceremonial, those were training exercises. There's a difference." "Training?" Kalksani's voice carried a note of dawning realization. "You mean humans actively practice combat techniques?" "Still, in an industrialized society." "Every day," Santos confirmed. Speaking of which, you might want to move your ship about 30 meters to the left. You're currently parked over an active training course, and we have exercises scheduled for this afternoon. The Varaxians hurriedly consulted their scanning devices again, this time paying attention to the structural anomalies they had previously ignored. Their perfect composure was starting to show cracks. Perhaps, Kalksani said carefully, we should revise our initial assessment of your species. Good idea, Rodriguez agreed, finishing his coffee. And while you're at it, you might want to let your ships know about the rest of our bases. You know, the ones they haven't spotted yet. Lieutenant Jin Park adjusted his dress uniform's collar as he entered the hastily established joint briefing room. The space had been quickly converted from a standard conference room at the Marine Corps base, now featuring both human military equipment and floating Varaxian holographic displays. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez stood near the tactical map, hiding his amusement as three Varaxian observers attempted to understand a simple topographical display. But where are the energy signature overlays? One of the Varaxians asked, their long fingers gesturing at the map. How do you track defensive positions without quantum markers? We use terrain features, Rodriguez explained patiently. High ground, natural cover, lines of sight. The basics never change, even with advanced technology. Park cleared his throat. Good morning. Lieutenant Jin Park, South Korean Special Forces, Allied Forces Liaison. He nodded to the Varaxians. I understand you've requested a demonstration of Earth's defensive capabilities. First Observer Kalksani turned away from the confusing map. Yes, Lieutenant. Our command structure is concerned about the discrepancies in our initial assessment of your species. We need to understand your actual military capacity. Then let's start with the basics, Park said, moving to the tactical display. Sergeant Rodriguez, could you pull up the training course layout? Rodriguez tapped a few commands, and the map shifted to show an overhead view of the base's combat training grounds. The Varaxians leaned forward, their eerily perfect faces showing genuine curiosity. This is a standard obstacle course, Park explained. Nothing fancy. Just dirt, wood, steel, and concrete. No energy fields, no quantum barriers, no advanced tech. Just humans against gravity and terrain. Primitive materials, one of the Varaxians noted, though their tone carried less condescension than before. But why maintain physical training when automation exists? Park smiled. Because technology can fail. Batteries die. Systems crash. But human determination. He gestured to a group of Marines running the course outside the window. That keeps going. The Varaxians watched in fascination as the Marines navigated the course, climbing, crawling, and overcoming obstacles with practiced efficiency. Their scanning devices were out again, presumably trying to detect some hidden technology assisting the humans. Impossible, the youngest Varaxian muttered. Their endurance levels exceed normal biological limitations. That's what training does, Rodriguez said. We push the limits, then push them again. Every day. Park moved to the window. Would you like to see something more advanced? We have a joint tactical exercise scheduled this afternoon. Marines and Special Forces working together on complex terrain navigation and objective securing. The Varaxians exchanged glances. Kalksani spoke first. Your species regularly practices competitive combat scenarios, without energy shields or personal protection fields. We use proper safety equipment, Park assured them. Body armor, helmets, protective gear. But yes, we train as we fight. Speaking of which, he checked his watch. That explosion you're about to hear is normal. Just the demolitions team doing their morning qualifications. On cue, a controlled explosion echoed across the base. The Varaxians jumped, their perfect composure slipping. How often do you detonate explosives in training? Kalksani asked, trying to maintain dignity. Regularly, Rodriguez answered. Need to stay familiar with the tools of the trade. Would you like to observe the exercise? Might help explain why your containment fields weren't as effective as expected. The youngest Varaxian was rapidly entering data into their crystalline device. Our preliminary species assessment failed to account for systematic combat preparation. We documented your warfare history, but assumed it was historical data, not ongoing practice. Park suppressed a smile. Earth has thousands of military bases like this one, each specialized, each training constantly. It's not just about having the technology, it's about mastering its use and being ready when it fails. And this is normal. For your species, Kalksani asked. As normal as breathing, Rodriguez confirmed. Now, about that demonstration. Would you prefer to start with small unit tactics, or should we show you how humans handle urban warfare scenarios? The Varaxian's expressions shifted through several emotions before settling on a mix of fascination and concern. Their perfect posture had given way to something more genuine. The look of teachers realizing they had badly underestimated their students. Perhaps, Kalksani said carefully, we should begin with your most basic capabilities and work our way up. Good choice, Park replied, as another explosion rumbled in the distance. Let's start with something simple, how humans fight without any technology at all. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training grounds as Lieutenant Park and Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez led the Varaxian delegation to the observation post. First, Observer Kalksani and their team had insisted on establishing what they called a guidance center at the base, apparently still convinced they could help humanity advance beyond their primitive ways. You'll want to put these on, Rodriguez said, offering the aliens a set of standard-issue ear protection. It's about to get loud. Surely our personal shields will be sufficient, one of the Varaxians replied, their energy field shimming in the sunlight. Park shrugged. Your choice. Just don't say we didn't warn you. Below them, a Marine fire team moved into position. They carried basic training gear, nothing more advanced than standard rifles and tactical equipment. The Varaxians had positioned one of their smaller ships at the far end of the range, its crystalline surface gleaming with active energy shields. This demonstration will prove the superiority of energy-based defensive systems, Kalksani announced confidently. Our shields can withstand impacts from. The crack of rifle fire interrupted them. The Varaxians flinched at the sound, their perfect composure shattering as their audio dampeners failed to fully suppress the noise. Downrange, their ship's shields flared bright blue where the bullets struck, but the kinetic energy transferred straight through. Impossible, the youngest Varaxian whispered, watching as their supposedly impenetrable barrier did nothing to stop simple lead projectiles. The shields should have absorbed the energy. That's your problem right there, Rodriguez explained, pointing to the impact points. You're thinking about energy absorption. We're thinking about kinetic transfer. Physics is physics, no matter how advanced your tech gets. The Marine fire team demonstrated a series of standard combat maneuvers, each one more concerning to the Varaxians than the last. Their scanners couldn't track the ballistic trajectories effectively. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, struggled with the sheer physical force of human ammunition. But these are just primitive projectile weapons, Kalksani protested, though their voice had lost its earlier confidence. Park smiled. Sometimes the old ways work best. Watch this. He keyed his radio. Team 2, you're up. A second group of Marines emerged from covered positions that the Varaxian scanners had completely missed. They moved with practiced efficiency, using the terrain in ways that seemed to confuse the alien observers. Why did they crouch behind solid objects? One Varaxian asked. Energy shields are far more effective. The answer came in the form of an M203 grenade launcher. The training round arsed gracefully through the air, passing straight through the ship's energy field and landing with perfect precision near its landing gear. If it had been a live round, the ship would have been crippled. Standard fire team tactics, Rodriguez explained as the Varaxians stared in shock. Nothing special, just good training and basic physics. Kalksani's perfect features had shifted to show genuine concern. Our reports suggested your species had no effective defense against our technology. We don't need special defenses, Park replied. Just the basics done right. Your ships might be able to shrug off an energy blast, but they still need to follow the laws of physics. And we got about 10,000 years of experience working with those laws. The demonstration continued, each sequence revealing more gaps in the Varaxians' understanding of human combat capabilities. Their ships' advanced sensors, calibrated to detect energy weapons and shield frequencies, proved nearly useless against simple smoke grenades. Their automated defense systems, designed to track energy signatures, couldn't cope with the heat-masked movements of trained infantry. This is just a basic training exercise, Rodriguez noted, watching the color drain from the aliens' faces. We haven't even started showing you the advanced stuff yet. Advanced. Kalkseni's voice cracked slightly. You mean there's more? Park checked his watch. The mechanized infantry unit should be arriving soon. You might want to move your ship before they start their demonstration. Those training rounds won't damage it, but they'll leave some embarrassing dents in that pretty hull. The Varaxians hurriedly began sending commands to their vessel, their movements no longer carrying that ethereal grace. As their ship lifted off, awkwardly maneuvering away from the training ground, Rodriguez turned to Park with a grin. Think we should tell them about the Marines' annual combined arms exercise? Let's not scare them too much, Park replied. At least not until they've finished moving all their ships out of our training areas. Captain Isabella Santos stood before the assembled Varaxian delegation in the base's main briefing room, her presentation ready on both traditional screens and their crystalline holographic displays. After yesterday's demonstration, the aliens had requested, with surprising urgency, information about human combat limitations. Today we'll be discussing rules of engagement and international military protocols, Santos began, noting how the Varaxians leaned forward with intense focus. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez and Lieutenant Park sat at the back of the room, trying not to smile. Let's start with the basics, Santos continued, bringing up the first slide. These are what we consider acceptable combat practices under current international law. First, Observer Kalkseni raised a graceful hand. Clarification needed. You have laws for warfare? Of course, Santos replied. We've had centuries to figure out what works and what crosses the line. These rules exist because we've tried everything else. The youngest Varaxian analyst was frantically taking notes on their crystal tablet. Your species developed restrictions on combat methods through experimental process. You could say that. Santos changed to the next slide. Let's discuss prohibited weapons first. Chemical agents, biological weapons, certain types of explosives. You developed all of these. Another Varaxian interrupted, their perfect features showing distinct alarm. And agreed not to use them, Santos confirmed. Most of the time. Rodriguez coughed to hide his laugh as the aliens exchanged concerned glances. Moving on to acceptable targeting protocols, Santos continued. Military installations are valid targets. Civilian infrastructure generally isn't unless it has direct military application. Though the definition of military application can get complicated in modern warfare. Kalkseni's hand rose again. Your species distinguishes between military and civilian targets, even with primitive projectile weapons. Precisely because we use primitive weapons, Santos explained. When your weapons can harm everyone in an area, you need to be very clear about where you can use them. The Varaxian analyst's tablet was making distressed chiming sounds as they tried to process this information, but our scans showed no evidence of these weapon systems. That's because we locked them away, Park added from the back. After we figured out how to make them, we decided they were too dangerous to use regularly. Too dangerous? The word seemed to cause the Varaxians physical discomfort. Santos pulled up the next slide, showing various military formations. Let's move on to acceptable combat tactics. These are the approved methods for ground warfare, naval engagement, and aerial combat. These are the approved methods, Kalkseni asked, emphasizing the word. There are unapproved methods. Many, Santos confirmed cheerfully. We had to ban quite a few approaches that proved too effective. For example, this section covers prohibited infiltration techniques. The Varaxian delegation spent the next 20 minutes in stunned silence as Santos detailed the extensive list of combat techniques humans had developed, tested, and subsequently decided were too extreme for regular use. And that brings us to proportional response, Santos concluded. The principle that military action should be proportionate to the threat. We try not to escalate conflicts unnecessarily. Proportional response. Kalkseni's voice had lost its musical quality. You mean humans intentionally limit their combat effectiveness? When appropriate, Santos nodded. It's important to show restraint. The youngest Varaxian finally spoke up, their voice barely a whisper. First observer, I believe we need to revise our species' threat assessment protocols. Agreed, Kalkseni replied, trying to maintain composure. Captain Santos, you mentioned these were current protocols. How often do they change? We review and update them regularly, Santos explained. As new technologies develop, we need to consider their military applications and establish appropriate guidelines. You plan for future combat innovations. The horror in the Varaxian's voice was now unmistakable. Of course, Santos smiled. Would you like to see our predictive analysis department's latest reports? They have some fascinating theories about potential applications of your energy shield technology. The Varaxian delegation hastily declined, making excuses about needed to urgently contact their command structure. As they filed out, Rodriguez approached Santos. Think we should tell them about the classified sections? He asked quietly. Let's save something for tomorrow, Santos replied. After all, we haven't even started on the really interesting parts yet. The young Varaxian analyst, Nexel, stared at the historical display in the Naval Museum with an expression that bordered on existential dread. Commander Hiroshi Tanaka stood beside them, calmly explaining the evolution of naval warfare, while Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez and Lieutenant Park provided additional context. So, you're saying humans fought battles on water before you had energy propulsion? Nexel's crystal tablet trembled slightly in their elongated fingers. Still do, Tanaka replied, pointing to a model of a modern aircraft carrier. There's something about ships that energy shields just can't replicate. The feel of the ocean, the way it moves. But why continue using such methods when you have aircraft? Nexel asked, desperate to understand. Our species abandoned surface transport once we developed gravity manipulation. Rodriguez chuckled, because the ocean teaches you things technology can't. Like how to fight in 3 dimensions, how to deal with limited resources, how to survive when your fancy equipment fails. The display shifted to show ancient naval battles, then medieval warfare, then modern naval combat exercises. Nexel's perfect features contorted as they tried to process the sheer variety of combat methods humans had developed. Your species learned to fight. Everywhere, they whispered. Land, sea, air, even underwater. And you keep practicing all of it. Can't afford to forget the basics, Park added. Technology changes, but the fundamentals of combat don't. Position, timing, resource management. These things matter whether you're in a wooden ship or a stealth destroyer. Tanaka led them to the next display, showing special operations training. This is where it gets interesting. Modern special forces combine everything we've learned over thousands of years of warfare. Ancient stealth techniques, medieval hand-to-hand combat, industrial age explosives, digital age technology. Stop, Nexel pleaded, their tablet now emitting a high-pitched whine of distress. You're saying humans don't just preserve combat knowledge, you actively combine and improve it. Of course, Rodriguez replied. Why waste good techniques just because they're old? A knife still works when your energy weapon runs out of power. The museum's AI system switched to a display about guerrilla warfare and resistance movements. Nexel's eyes widened as they watched historical footage of humans fighting against technologically superior forces and winning. First observer Kalkseni needs to see this, they muttered, fingers flying over their tablet. Our entire assessment of human warfare was based on energy signatures and technological advancement. We never considered adaptation. That's humanity's real strength, Tanaka explained, his voice carrying the weight of historical understanding. We don't just develop new technology. We figure out how to use everything available, old and new, in ways nobody expects. The display shifted again, showing modern military exercises incorporating both advanced technology and primitive tools. Nexel watched in fascination as soldiers moved seamlessly between high-tech equipment and basic survival skills. Your species doesn't advance past old methods, they realized. You just add new layers while keeping the old ones sharp. Now you're getting it, Park smiled. Why rely on just one approach when you can master them all? A message chimed on Nexel's tablet. They read it, their perfect composure cracking further. Our deep space scans just completed analyzing your historical sites. The number of battlefields, the variety of terrain, the evidence of different combat methods. All part of the learning process, Rodriguez said casually. Every environment teaches you something new. Desert warfare is different from jungle warfare. Urban combat is different from mountain operations. And you train for all of them. Nexel's voice had risen an octave. Have to, Tanaka confirmed. Never know what you might face out there. Speaking of which, would you like to see our space combat simulations? We've been running some interesting scenarios since your ships arrived. Nexel's tablet clattered to the floor. You're already analyzing how to fight us. Nothing personal, Rodriguez assured them. We do that with everyone. It's kind of a hobby at this point. The young analysts stared at the displays, their species' confidence in technological superiority visibly crumbling. We thought we were coming to guide a primitive species, they whispered. But you've been preparing for war in ways we never imagined. Not preparing for war, Tanaka corrected gently. Preparing for everything. There's a difference. The Joint Species Conference Room had been hastily assembled in a secure wing of the Pentagon. Crystal displays floated alongside traditional screens, while both human and Varaxian representatives sat around a massive oak table that had witnessed decades of military planning. First Observer Kalksani stood with practiced grace, though their perfect posture couldn't quite hide their unease. After careful consideration, the Varaxian Empire has decided to reclassify Earth as a highly advanced defense world. Lieutenant Colonel Santos managed to keep her expression neutral, but Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez noticed the slight smile tugging in her lips. Lieutenant Park, seated beside him, was taking detailed notes. We appreciate the reclassification, General Chen responded, her voice carrying decades of command experience. Though I'm curious about the specific criteria that led to this decision. Nexel, the young Varaxian analyst, activated a holographic display showing their updated assessment. Their hands trembled slightly as they began the presentation. Human military capability significantly exceeds initial parameters, they explained. Our standard evaluation metrics proved inadequate. The display showed a cascade of revised threat assessments, each one higher than the last. Inadequate how? Chen asked, though everyone in the room already knew the answer. We based our species' advancement scale on technological progression, Kalksani admitted. Energy weapons, shield systems, quantum communications. We never considered a species might master combat itself rather than simply advancing its tools. Rodriguez leaned over to Park. Think we should show them the Marine Corps martial arts program next, he whispered. Let's not give them any more nightmares, Park replied quietly. They're still processing the basic training footage. The holographic display shifted to show various human military installations worldwide. Our revised scans have identified over 10,000 significant military facilities, Nexel continued. Each specialized for different combat environments and methods. The sheer variety of training scenarios suggests a level of preparation we've never encountered. We like to be thorough, Santos commented. Kalksani activated another display, this one showing their initial invasion plan. Our containment strategy was based on energy suppression and technological superiority we never considered. They paused, searching for the right words. That we might just walk through your barriers and shoot the power source, Rodriguez suggested helpfully. Several Varaxian observers visibly flinched at the reminder. Yes, Kalksani acknowledged. Your species' ability to combine primitive and advanced techniques is unprecedented. The Varaxian Empire formally requests the establishment of a military exchange program. The room went quiet. General Chen raised an eyebrow. Exchange program. We believe, Kalksani said carefully, that both our species could benefit from shared knowledge. While we possess advanced technology, your understanding of fundamental combat principles is extensive. Very extensive, Nexel added, their tablet displaying footage from yesterday's combined arms exercise. Your ability to maintain proficiency in multiple combat disciplines while developing new ones is particularly impressive. And concerning, another Varaxian muttered, earning a sharp look from Kalksani. We would be interested in such an exchange, General Chen replied, though we should establish clear parameters. The next hour was spent drafting preliminary agreements. The Varaxians, having abandoned their initial plans for peaceful guidance, now seemed eager to learn from the species they had previously dismissed as primitive. One final matter, Kalksani announced as the meeting drew to a close. We request permission to maintain a small observation post on Earth, purely for diplomatic purposes. Of course, General Chen agreed, though you might want to relocate your current position. That area is scheduled for artillery practice next week. The Varaxians quickly agreed to move their remaining ships to designated diplomatic zones, far from any military training areas. As the meeting adjourned, Rodriguez approached the still-shaken Nexel. Don't worry too much, he said kindly. We'll start the exchange program with something simple, maybe just basic hand-to-hand combat training. Nexel's perfect features couldn't quite hide their terror at the word simple. They clutched their tablet closer, no doubt remembering the countless combat techniques humans considered basic. Your species, they said quietly, has an interesting definition of simple. Wait until you see what we consider advanced, Rodriguez replied with a grin. That's when the real fun begins. Master Sergeant Rodriguez stood at the front of the newly established Human Varaxian Defense Academy, trying not to smile at the sight before him. 30 Varaxian officers, their perfect posture now deliberately relaxed, wore modified human combat uniforms adapted for their elongated frames. Lieutenant Park, recently promoted to captain, stood beside him reviewing the training schedule. Today's lesson, Rodriguez announced, covers basic infantry tactics. And by basic, I mean techniques that humans mastered before we invented the wheel. The young analyst Nexel, now serving as the official Varaxian liaison, raised their hand. Query. Why start with such primitive methods when we have access to advanced technology? Because, Rodriguez replied, the day your energy shields fail and your quantum weapons run dry, you'll thank me for teaching you how to dig a proper foxhole. The Varaxians had come a long way from their initial horror at human warfare. After 6 months of joint training, they developed an almost religious reverence for what they called fundamental combat principles. Their crystal tablets were filled with detailed notes on everything from hand-to-hand combat to psychological warfare. Remember, Park added, technology should enhance your capabilities, not replace them. Now, who's ready to learn how humans fought before we had gunpowder? Several Varaxian hands shot up eagerly. Their species' dedication to learning had quickly overcome their initial squeamishness about primitive warfare. Some had even started showing enthusiasm for what they termed ancient victory methodologies. First Observer Kalksani, now the Academy's co-director, entered the training room. Their ceremonial robes had been replaced by a practical uniform that combined human design with Varaxian materials. I trust everyone is ready for today's practical exercise. Just waiting on the equipment, Rodriguez confirmed, though I still think we should start them on spears before moving to swords. Unnecessary, Kalksani replied with newfound confidence. Last week's combat dynamics class covered thrown weapons extensively. They're ready for close-quarter infantry techniques. The training floor transformed as holographic projectors merged with physical obstacles, creating a hybrid environment that challenged both species' strengths. Viraxian energy technology enhanced traditional human training methods, while basic physical principles kept everyone grounded in reality. You know, Park said quietly to Rodriguez, 6 months ago they thought we were barely civilized because we still practiced hand-to-hand combat. Now they're arguing about the optimal length of a Roman gladius for their body type. Rodriguez chuckled. Funny how things change. The day's training proceeded smoothly. The Viraxians, despite their initial technological superiority, had proven to be humble and dedicated students of human military arts. They approached each new lesson with a combination of academic fascination and practical respect. Master Sergeant, Nexel called out during a break. We've been analyzing historical Earth conflicts for patterns. Would you review our findings? Rodriguez examined their crystal tablet, now modified to display traditional topographical maps alongside energy signature readings. The Viraxians had begun integrating human military wisdom with their advanced technology, creating hybrid strategies that neither species had considered before. Not bad, he noted, reviewing their analysis. You're starting to think like humans, expecting everything to go wrong and planning accordingly. We've learned that preparation transcends technology, Nexel replied seriously. Though we still don't understand why humans insist on practicing with primitive projectile weapons. Because sometimes the old ways work best, Park explained. Speaking of which, next week we're starting mountain warfare training. Hope everyone's ready for some rock climbing. The Viraxians exchanged excited glances. Their initial fear of primitive combat had evolved into genuine enthusiasm for human military traditions. Some had even started collecting historical weapons, treating them with the same reverence they once reserved for advanced technology. As the day's training concluded, Rodriguez watched his students practice basic sword techniques with perfect precision. The same beings who had arrived to guide humanity now spent their days learning human battle strategies with religious dedication. You know what the best part is? He said to Park. We haven't even shown them our classified capabilities yet. One step at a time, Park replied with a smile. Let them master the basics first. After all, we've got 10,000 years of warfare to teach them. In the background, a Viraxian officer successfully completed a complex sword pattern, their crystal tablet automatically recording the movement for further study. The future of interspecies military cooperation was looking bright, and thoroughly well prepared for anything the universe might throw at them.